Hi, everyone. Welcome and good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Claire, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm pleased to introduce this virtual event with Dorie Greenspan, presenting her latest book, Baking with Dorie, Sweet, Salty, and Simple. She'll be in conversation with Joanne Chang. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our growing digital community during these challenging times. Thank you for joining us tonight in support of authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. Every week, we're hosting a slew of virtual events, and our schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and even browse our shelves from home. This time of year in particular, we have a ton of gift ideas as well. After the introduction, I will drop a link in the chat to order a copy of Dorie's book. Your purchases and financial contributions, I'll also be sharing a link to donate, make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever, support the future of a landmark independent bookstore. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, you can just go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will get through as many as time allows. This event also has closed captioning. Depending on the version of Zoom you're using, you may need to enable the captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. And finally, as you might have experienced in virtual gatherings over the past year and a half, technical issues might arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them quickly, and we just thank you for your patience and understanding. Dorie Greenspan is the author of 14 beloved cookbooks, including Around My French Table, Baking from My Home to Yours, and Dories Cookies. She's been awarded 5 James Beard Awards and named one of the who's who of food and beverage in America. You may also be familiar with her generally mouth-watering column in the New York Times Magazine. And everyone here should sign up for her newsletter, XOXO Dorie. I will also drop a link for that in the chat after the intro. Tonight, she'll be talking with Joanne Chang, a chef who needs no introduction for those of us in the Boston area, spoiled as we are by her flour bakeries in Myers and Chang. She's the author of 5 cookbooks, and she's been recognized by the James Beard Foundation, as well as by Gourmet, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, and the New York Times, among many others. For those of us stuck at home over the past year and a half, the kitchen and trying new things has been a welcome escape. In her latest cookbook, Baking with Dorie, Dorie Greenspan shares her favorite recipes, many of them inspired by her adventures in Paris and beyond. It's a little bit of culinary escapism, but each recipe has been meticulously tested, and so as a home cook, you know you are in good hands. At Cooks Without Borders, Leslie Brenner shares her top 3 reasons she loves the book. First, because Dorie has so many delicious and original ideas, all based on sound technique and spinning off tradition. She holds our hands, understands our fears, and guides us to delicious success. Second, because the book is largely inspired by Dorie's travels. And third, because Dorie provides lots of room to play and plenty of choices. And as an early reader and taster writes, this is a beautiful cookbook with gorgeous photos of almost every recipe in it. Since the pandemic has all but frozen us in place, I loved being able to dream about all the places I'd love to travel to and where I could eat all of the goodies from those places that are detailed in Greenspan's book. And so now I am very pleased to turn things over to tonight's speakers. The digital podium is yours, Joanne and Dorie.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Dorie. How are you?
Happy to see you. Happy that everyone came to, what do we say? People don't come out.
No, virtually. They came, right? They're
Yeah.
visiting virtually. And it's actually probably more people than we could have done in person. So that's one of the things that the silver linings of the pandemic is that we're able to connect with people. Like especially tonight, if you didn't want to drive into Boston, you could do this virtually.
So thank you. Thank you all for coming virtually.
Exactly. So Dorie, your beautiful book is here. And I loved it so much. And I have to tell you that when it arrived in the bakery, it got sent to the bakery, a nice big package. And I was in a meeting with probably 10 or 15 people. I was talking about something business related and kind of going through mail. I opened this up I pulled this out and literally the entire table gasped. And then we passed it around and everybody was in love with it. And then I brought it home and Christopher and I spent the evening flipping through, and he's become a baker because of you. He's been flipping through the pages, selecting
Because
things.
he's never seen anyone bake before, right?
Well, I think that I have become a cookbook writer because of you. The things that I have learned reading all of your cookbooks, they have guided me, and you've mentored me both in person and without even knowing it, just through your books. So I want to thank you.
You are so kind. So when the book came, you and Christopher took a picture.
Yes.
Right. Completely adorable. Yes. Thank you.
It was one of those pictures that it wasn't staged. I brought it home. We were both so excited, and I wanted to capture the moment because I wanted to share it with you because it just made us so happy. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm super excited. I've got a bunch of questions, and I thought that we would start before we start talking specifically about the book. You and I are fortunate enough to have gotten to know each other both personally and not just as cookbook authors and bakers. And when we are out to dinner, there's always a bunch of people and a bunch of different discussion topics. And tonight I get to focus just on you. And I get to ask all the questions that I've wanted to ask, but sometimes I know that you don't want to monopolize dinner table conversation. So I wanted to ask a bunch of things that I've always wondered as somebody who has admired you immensely, and you've mentored me again without even knowing through your books and just through your newsletter and through being you. So one of the things, especially with this book, that I've been so eager to know, as somebody who's written 5 cookbooks and this is your 14th, how do you keep going? How do you find the creativity to come up with all of the recipes? Is it easy? Is it hard?
It's hard. I was going to say it's hard. This book was, every book is different. This one was completely different because of the pandemic. But, you know, I'm going to turn this around and ask you, because you have 5 books, you're also creating new things all the time in the bakery. But I find, I go back to my cookie book, Dories Cookies, which came out in 2016. I was so excited about writing it, and I was so happy when my editor said she wanted it. And then, you know, there's that, oh, somebody wants what I want. I'm so excited. I've got a new project, right? And then you actually have to do it.
Yes.
And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? I've agreed to do 200 recipes on just cookies.
Unbelievable.
How is this going to happen? And I found, and it was, I should have come to this understanding before, but I didn't. It was with cookies that I realized that the more you work, the more you think. It's kind of a circle. You work, you think about the work feeds the work. You're focused, and new ideas come from work, from actually doing the work.
Right.
That said, travel is an amazing source of inspiration. And with this book, I traveled, and then the pandemic hit. And so it was, you know, the recipes from Lisbon, from Stockholm, from Stop and Shop.
So you were writing the book pre-pandemic, and then you had to continue it and finish it during the pandemic.
And I was imagining that this book would be, I would be in France, where, as you know, I live part-time. I'd be in France. I'd be visiting new pastry shops. I'd be looking at new ingredients. But tell me, when you're always creating something new, you're always thinking about a holiday, a season or something. Where does that inspiration come from?
This is what I knew you would do, Dorie. I'm interviewing you. This is like at dinner time. I think, like you, travel is really inspiring. And for me, I have found traveling through Instagram has been very inspiring, that you and I can go visit bakeries all around the world by just tagging, I'll send stuff to our pastry chefs in the bakery from a bakery in Australia, for example, and say, wow, this looks incredible. Let's figure out how to do it. So I think that traveling, whether directly and in person or virtually, as we are doing this book talk now, has been really inspiring. And my world has been opened up since the world of Instagram, just being able to see what other people do.
It's interesting. I think often about what excuse me, about what Julia Child said about finding something that you're passionate about and sticking with it.
Mhm.
And so I feel I may be saying the same thing with different words, but again, when you're lucky enough to do something that you love, it just fills you. And
does.
so, I'll see a spice, or sometimes it's just a color, and I'll think, well, that's pretty. I wonder, that reminds me of apricot. Apricot, what else is that? And it starts.
It starts the whole cycle, yes. And you can tell that in your books, because they're also personal. All of the recipes come from inside.
Someplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many cookbooks do you have?
Thousands. I'm looking at a wall. Actually, there's flour and there's pastry love and there's Myers and Chang.
Nice.
My friend Jennifer's bitter. I have a lot of books. When we recently renovated, and I boxed up hundreds of books, which I donated. I can't. I don't need another book, but I do. I love cookbooks, and for me, they're comforting, they're inspiring, they're the only decoration I care about. Right? I would be terrible on a home decor show if somebody were to say, "And what books? Just I want books, and books. That's it."
I think this should be my Zoom background, right? I love it right here. So so many people in the food industry. Who do you learn from? Who do you look forward to their next book?
I'm not allowed to say you, but you know that. And but I look. It's interesting. I just got. I'm looking over here at my desk. There's a new book by Ottolenghi, The Test Kitchen.
Yes.
There's a book by Emma at called Big Little Recipes, Big Little Recipes, that just came today from Food 52. I'm less. It's less particular. It's like I just got the mooncakes, milk bread, right?
Cool. Yep.
That's a way of baking I know nothing about, so it
Right.
really interests me. I never know what's going to strike me. I don't know.
love it.
I met a young woman named Sama Dada at and she's written an all plant-based book, and I find it fascinating. So it's not just one person. It's something that just goes spark.
You are so curious wherever you go and whatever you see, that your interests are it sounds like your interests are so broad.
I think I'm just a scattered personality. And just kind of, fluttery in the butter.
Now, I'm curious as to advice that you give to both beginning bakers and experienced bakers. Do you have different pieces of advice for the two different groups?
So, I'm going to turn that question around to you. So, beginning bakers, somebody just wrote to me today, and they had just gotten the book, and they said, "Where should I begin? I'm not really a great baker." And I said, I didn't know what to say. And I said, open the book, find something that calls to you, that you would love to eat and make that.
Mhm.
And, I think the only advice for beginners is to do it, to get into the kitchen and to bake. And I mean, I knew nothing. No, I got married when I was 19. I wanted to cook and bake. No one at home had ever done it. So I was like blazing a new path. It was Michael, it was me, and it was the Settlement House cookbook and the New York Times cookbook.
Wow.
And yeah, I didn't know that coolbiac was hard to make. Right?
Right,
Um,
right. Okay.
It just sounded interesting. And I think that it's if a recipe is well written, particularly in baking, then you just follow it.
Right.
There aren't as many judgment calls in baking as there are in cooking. And so I tell people the basics: read the recipe twice,
Yep.
lay out all of your ingredients,
Yep.
follow, preheat your oven. I have to put my lasagna in.
Oh, that's
Be
right.
right back. Wait.
Put your lasagna in. That's right. Right before we hopped onto this, Dorie was finishing off her lasagna dinner with a little bit of olive oil. And I was supposed to remind you to put it in before we started.
Sorry, just forgot it. Yeah, preheat the oven. The basics, and what I tell everyone is to find pleasure in the process.
Yes.
That it's not just the finished. Somebody is the oven timer set.
We're all going to help you.
Thank you. I think when we finish, the lasagna will too. I probably should set a timer. I won't forget it.
We'll remember.
I won't
We'll
forget.
remember. Christopher, you have to help me remember.
But baking is so much about working with ingredients, and it takes a while to make something.
Mhm.
And so not learning, but focusing on the pleasure of making it, I think is important. What do you tell people?
For beginning bakers, very similar to what you said, read it. I have it like a list of concrete things. Read the recipe, do all your mise en place, preheat your oven. The other one that I add in is get a kitchen scale. I think that really helps people who don't really know. But I think you're right that I think a lot of people are scared of baking, but like what you just said makes so much sense. A well-written recipe basically lays it all out for you. And so you shouldn't be scared. You should go in with some confidence that you're going to create something great as long as you follow the recipe.
I don't know why baking gets such a bad rap. People say, oh, it's scary. Oh, it's scientific. Oh, it's what, it's follow the recipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think if people aren't used to being so precise, then maybe they worry if they mismeasure something, it will change the outcome, which it will. And versus cooking where, that lasagna, if it stays in for an extra 20 minutes, it might just be a little crispier on top.
So is that you?
Yeah.
It's usually me. I'm so glad it was.
Oh, it was
Do you
me.
need to get it? It's okay.
No, spam call.
So I don't know that I should say this, but when you said precise in measuring anything, I've been watching, but not watching is the wrong word, but I've seen so many people who have made my recipes and then write to me and say, I never weigh things. I think everybody should weigh things, but I didn't weigh, and I used the wrong this, and the recipe works. I think that in a solid recipe, there's like wiggle room around the edges.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
And you must see it in the bakery where different hands are working on things, and yet you get something right.
Exactly the same product. I thought you were going to say what often happens to me is somebody will email me and say, I tried your whatever banana bread recipe, but I didn't have
bananas.
Exactly. I didn't have bananas, or I didn't have 3 eggs, or I decided to add this instead of that and it didn't work. What happened? But I agree with you that the recipes are not as strict as one thinks. I think if you are a beginning baker, it's helpful to follow the recipe.
Always,
But
always.
then the advice for experienced bakers is that once you know how to bake, you really can, there's so much wiggle room, you really can make the recipe your own. So it sounds like you have experienced people who are writing to you.
Well, but it's also, so ever since, this is my 30th year as a cookbook author. My first book,
Congratulations.
it's amazing. But I'm only 27. My first book came out in March of 1991. So
Wow.
it's right, it's 30
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And why was I going to tell you this? Oh, in my very first book, I had these little postscripts to the recipes that I called playing around. And I've done that through all of my books.
Yep.
And I did it because that's what I do. And at that point, there was no internet. There was no one writing to say I didn't have, or I did. And so, but I finish a recipe and I think, you know, I used apricots. I'm on an
Yep.
apricot thing today, but I could have used cherries, or I used Calvados to flavor something with apples. If I were using prunes, it could be Armagnac. And
Mhm.
so I have all of these what if, what if, what if, what if. And so I started to do the playing around. And so what you said about once you're experienced, you can make a recipe your own. I think, yes, definitely yes. But also, if you stick to the form of the recipe, if you're not, using chopped chicken instead of bananas, um, you know, then you can start playing with the flavors, or you can
Right.
play with the way you finish a cake, or you can add some textural, some add-ins, some crunchies, something that baking is like this,
Yep.
but it's also like this.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities to make a recipe your own.
And I think that's what your books do, is they give people the confidence, because once they've baked some of the recipes, they start to understand that from you. And then they are able to then come out of that little pastry box and add a little bit of their own flavor to it, which is
I love the
wonderful.
idea of being in a pastry box. I'm imagining a little Linzer cookie and a cake.
So when you write a book, who are you writing for? Do you picture somebody in your head that you're writing the recipe for, or are you writing for yourself?
It's such an interesting question. So I write for an imaginary home baker.
Okay.
Whether or not he or she has asked me, I have appeared in their kitchen and I am there telling them what to do. So
Excellent.
I do imagine myself with a baker. And so that I mean, I do talk with my hands, as you can see, but often I'll be sitting at my computer and I'm writing a recipe and I'm doing something with my hands. I'm trying to figure out, how do you roll
Yeah.
that? Do you really need to press something down? And I'm trying to visualize what someone will be doing and what the pitfalls might be, so I work, here's my notebook.
Oh, wow.
Here's my pencil. I work in pencil and paper to
That's amazing.
start a recipe. And while I'm working, I'll look and see, oh, look, the dough separates a little bit, but
Mhm.
then it comes together, and I'll make a little note so that I can tell my imaginary baking companion, don't worry, it separates now, it looks terrible, it's ugly, but keep mixing and it will be okay. So yeah, I write with a little friend in mind, but the recipes they're what I want.
Yeah.
They're the flavors that I like. It's the food that I like. And I said that the other day to somebody and I felt like, well, that's pretty selfish. And I thought, well, but no, I mean, I can't I guess I could create something using flavors I don't like, and I think that, the same way that, I love what you make at Flower. When I buy a book of yours, I want those flavors, that look, that, and I was thinking it's a little bit like, it's so funny because I was thinking, Michael's my husband, we're talking about this last night about the recipes being the author's personality in a way. And it's like, you read a book critic or you read a movie reviewer and you say, Susie told me she loved that movie in whatever, and I saw it and I didn't like it. And so you think, well, Susie doesn't have my taste.
Right, right.
And I think it's like that with cookbooks.
Agreed, agreed. You have to write what you love and just know that not everybody's going to love the same thing, but if you love it, then that will come through in the recipes and it'll resonate. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. So what are some favorite recipes from this book?
So you can't trust me because
Okay.
I can't even decide what color socks to wear. So now you're going to say, pick a favorite.
I know.
Yeah, no, that's really hard for me. But there are recipes, often a recipe.
That's, hold on.
It's not my son calling you, is it?
Oh, it was, I don't know who that was.
I did a quick TV. It was like 4 minutes. And I thought I had turned my phone off and it
Oh my
rang.
gosh, it's happening again. Hold on. Hello? Are you back?
Oh, me?
Okay, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna
No,
let
I was
that
trying
join us. No.
No. Oh.
Wait, what was I? Oh, favorite. I almost got out of telling you about.
Well, when people ask me that, it's so hard to pick one favorite. So how about what are the things in the next couple of months that you'll bake from? You'll bake from the book.
I can do that. But what I was going to say is, obviously the recipes are in the book because I love them. And I have a section in most of the chapters called Sweethearts. And they came about because I never know what my book is going to look like until the very end. So it's like just when my editor says it's, deadline, I start, like, I put all the recipes on little pieces, the names on pieces of paper. And then I say, okay, breakfast chapter. Could be a simple cake. No, I'll leave it here. And I start organizing. And when I started to do that, I realized that I had gone deep on some things. So like in the breakfast chapter, I haven't had a breakfast chapter since Baking from My Home to Yours in 2006. Yes, I was really happy to do that. There's a lot of brioche. So there's a brioche basic loaf that you can make different shapes. And then there are sticky buns and babka and cheese rolls. So in cookies, there are a lot of chocolate chip cookies. In the basics chapter, there are a lot of crusts. So those are kind of favorites. But often a recipe becomes a favorite because of the context, because it's, I've met someone who gave me the recipe, or I was someplace that meant something lovely to me, and the recipe connects me to that. But there's a 2.0 version of World Peace Cookies in the book, and that's a big deal for me.
Exactly.
There's a lemon tart that I love, and I was thinking of making it for Thanksgiving. I'll make a pumpkin pie, and I've got a recipe in the book for maple walnut pie. So not pecan, but just, how walnuts are a little bitter almost.
Yes, they have that tannic aftertaste when you bite into it.
I love, and I'm doing it with, somebody just said miso maple cake. Hi, Joel. Thank you for reminding me. I do love that too. But so the walnut has maple syrup, which also is like sweet, but a little edgy. And I'll make those too. But I'm going to make the Riviera lemon tart. And I think I'm going to
Beautiful.
go on a crusade for one kind of puckery dessert at the end of a holiday meal. You know, the meal is rich,
Yes.
it's full, it's feasty. And wouldn't, and I mean, the lemon tart is not rich, but it's that kind of puckery. And wouldn't that be a nice way to end?
I love that. Agreed. If you have something that's too sweet or too cloyingly rich, you end up feeling not so great, but something bright and acidic really cleans everything out.
Right. I also love this tart. So for many reasons, but my friend Rosa Jackson teaches cooking in Nice, in the old part of the city. And so we went to the market together and we bought stuff and we went back to her studio and she made this tart. And you make the dough. Am I going to remember this? I could look at the recipe. It's got olive oil and melted butter in it, and you make it by hand.
Wow.
You press it in and you don't wait for it to cool. So you make it, it's warm, press in the dough, it goes right into the oven for 10 minutes. So
Okay.
this is almost like an instant tart.
Yeah.
And you make the filling, which is almost like a very light pastry cream. And that goes into the tart, it goes into the refrigerator. So it's the kind of tart dessert that you could make just a little while before, you know, it could be almost last minute and it's
Yes.
beautiful and elegant and yeah. And I
The
think,
picture is beautiful.
yeah, I think it would be great after a holiday meal. And yes, the miso maple loaf.
That is a favorite. Dorie, are there recipes that you wanted to be in this book that didn't make it?
I'm laughing because this was what an experience. I had two Dutch pancakes, you know, Dutch babies
Yes.
in the book, one sweet, one savory. So, you know, cast iron skillet, really hot, put the mixture in, put it in the oven. It's gorgeous, right? I love them. I put them in the book. And after I turned the manuscript in, I could never make a Dutch baby that worked.
Oh no.
It was like a kitchen demon had just swept in and said, "You will never make a Dutch baby again." I couldn't. And so if you look in one of my notebooks, it's like Dutch baby, Dutch baby.
Never again.
I couldn't. And so both of them came out of the book. I've been making them for decades.
Isn't that funny how pastry recipes, you'll make them over and over and then something will happen. It's happened to us as well.
Really?
Yeah, we have a blueberry muffin recipe that, I mean, we finally figured it out, but the first 5 years of flour, we must have changed our blueberry muffin recipe every 4 or 5 months. Something happened. We don't know what it is. We were making it every day and then it just didn't work.
There's a wonderful story. So Maybe Heaters books were really what taught me, the books that taught me to bake. Right?
Yes.
And my copies, which are falling apart, have notes. Made this for Bill. Michael loved this. This, you know, just like all of them, they're all and they're spotted and she had in the very first book, I think it was just called Maybe Heaters Book of Great Desserts. She had a lemon cake that was made in like an angel food in a tube pan. I think this is the one. And I loved it. I just loved it. I made it for, it was the cake that I made as a gift at holiday time for all Joshua's teachers. That was it. Her book came out in paperback and that recipe was missing.
Oh no.
Yep, just not there.
Okay.
And then she had another book. It never appeared again. And then some number of books later, there it was. And she said, when I said kitchen demons, I was thinking about made a heater. She said
Ah,
that something happened to the recipe.
isn't that funny?
It just worked and then it didn't. And she quoted something from Isaac Bashevis Singer, who said that he thought that demons came in and changed his writing in the middle of the night.
I think that happens to recipes. I do. I love how you just explained how you made the tart dough with oil and butter. Are there techniques in here or ways of baking that were new to you, or something that you're really that are game changing techniques that you fall back on from time to time?
Well, there are things that I do that, something that changed my game a few years back was, and you may do this in the bakery because I know that often this is done when you have a big batch of something. So when I make a pie dough or a tart dough, I no longer chill it immediately. I roll it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I roll it. There you go. I roll it immediately while it's still soft and I can get it to do what I want it to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Instead of,
You do it between two pieces of parchment?
yeah.
Okay.
So I just take it, I make my dough in a food processor. I take it out, put it
Yep.
between the parchment, roll, and then chill it.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's so hard to roll it when it's
When
hot.
it's chilled. No, it's a good point. It's so funny because I was just teaching how to make pie, and I told everybody how to make pie dough, and I told everybody you need to chill it first, because if you use it immediately, it's too soft and you'll have to roll it between two pieces of parchment, and that's tricky.
See, I find it much easier.
Yeah, maybe I should do that again.
It's not as satisfying. There's something wonderful about taking flour and,
Exactly.
dusting, right? And then rolling dough up on your rolling pin and roll. It's lovely, but I'll forego that for the ease of rolling. But there's a recipe in the book for the Swedish Fika cake.
Yes, I saw that.
And so when I was in Stockholm, I met a pastry chef, Mia Orn, and she invited me to her studio for Fika, and I'd never had that. And it's if anybody Swedish is in the audience and I'm not getting this right, just pipe up and correct me, please. It's the custom of stopping a few times a day, often to have coffee and something sweet. But the purpose is really to talk, to have a conversation. And even corporations do this. So they'll stop.
Oh, wow.
Everybody comes, has a little coffee or something, and then back to work. So it's a chance to just, in COVID times, it's different, but a chance to just talk. And I think fika is both a verb and a noun. So I fika, you fika, we fika, and we
I
can
love that.
And Mia gave me a recipe for a cake that you bake and then you make I'm looking for it, you make an almond topping. So when the cake bakes for about 50 minutes, and when it's kind of firm enough, you pull it out and you put this almond topping on top. And wait, I'm just going to find, where is it?
The fika, I was
It's
just
on page 120.
okay.
So I'm going to show you. And then the topping bakes there. It's so beautiful, isn't it?
Gorgeous, yeah. And it looks, you want to pick off all that crunchy stuff on top.
All the almonds on top. And I had never done something quite like that, where you bake the cake and then you bake the topping onto it.
So you bake the topping after the cake is baked?
The cake is pretty much baked.
Oh,
and
I see.
Then you cook the topping, which isn't quite as, you're not really caramelizing it in the pan. And then you spread it on top and then you finish baking it.
That sounds amazing. I'm going to have Christopher make that.
Christopher, you can make that.
So I want to ask you one last question before we turn it over to audience questions. And for everybody who's listening, thank you again for being here. And if you have questions, please do type them into the Q&A. But you and I have had many conversations about cookbook writing, and this book is incredible. It's already on the New York Times bestseller list. which is such an amazing feat, but not surprising at all.
Oh, it's surprising. It's surprising.
It's well deserved. So my last question is, are you going to write another cookbook?
So when I wrote Everyday Dorie, which was my 13th book, I said I was finished. I said that was it. Baker's dozen, right? But Baker's dozen, right? It seemed perfect. And then this book came along. I don't know. I said no, I said never, and then I was reminded that I've said it before.
Right. Well, I think for all of us who love baking with you, that I hope you do write another book.
Oh, I love you, Joanne.
I love you too. I love you too. I know that there's some audience questions.
Yes, we have a bunch of great audience questions. Thank you so much for that great conversation. We'll jump right in. The first question is, do you have a favorite pie? And how do you feel about vodka pie crusts?
Oh, so I've never made a vodka pie crust. Joanne?
I haven't. I know that America's Test Kitchen recommends adding a little bit of vodka as the liquid. I think it prevents gluten development, I believe, but I haven't tried it either.
I don't know. I add vodka to ice cream.
Yeah, I saw that. That's such a smart
Right.
addition.
To make it more like it helps ice cream scoopability.
Exactly.
But no, I have no opinions on it because I've never made it. Sorry.
And what's your favorite pie?
Oh, my favorite. I love pie. So I make blueberry pie in season because that's Michael's favorite pie.
That's Christopher's favorite.
Really? Or maybe we should have like a pie party.
I would love that.
A pie social when it's blueberry season. I love apple pie. I have a new one in here where I use the spices that you would use if you were mulling cider.
Mm-hmm.
And I add that to the pie. I also love tarts. I like the slender slice. I feel like the proportion of crust to filling is really nice in a tart.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sort of on the pie front, but a little different. Someone asks, what 3 desserts would you make for a big Thanksgiving spread that aren't pumpkin pie? Not that there's anything wrong with pumpkin pie.
What 3 desserts would I make? Clearly, I have not thought about this. Okay, I'm going to make the lemon. I mean, there's no getting away from that Riviera lemon tart. Oh, how about this? Actually, I have the fixings for this in the refrigerator now. So I dropped my book and broke my binding. So every time I lift it, something else falls out. Sorry. I do have another one, but this was my first copy, so I'm attached to it. This is the cocoa cranberry Linzer tart. So it's a chocolate Linzer cookie, and the filling is cranberry sauce, rather tart, with cooked with raspberry jam. So that would be not pumpkin. And now we need something that's not this would be so much fun. Wait. And this lives in the freezer until you're ready for it. So this is a very classic vacherin. It's layers of meringue and just like crumbled, and parfait, which was the original. I hope I'm getting this right. Joanne, help me. Parfait was like ice cream before ice cream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a way to make ice cream without the ice cream maker. You beat up the eggs and you beat up the cream and then combine, instead of combining and then having an ice cream maker add air.
Right. And so this is just a lovely dessert that that you could make tonight after we finish chatting and put in your freezer and pull out for Thanksgiving. And there's a lot to be said for being able to just pull dessert out of the freezer.
Excellent. As you're holding up the book, this next question seems appropriate, which is, do you style your own photos for the cookbooks, or do you work with someone for that?
No, so I don't. And Claire, you mentioned my newsletter at the top of this chat. Yesterday, so I do it twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. And yesterday was a behind the scenes look at making the photographs for the book. So the photograph team is photographer. Here it was Mark Weinberg. And it was Samantha Sinabaratney, who's also a cookbook author, and she styled the food, meaning she made it, and Brooke Dionarine, who did the prop styling. And I'll be writing about both Sam and Brooke, because what they do on a shoot is really interesting. And I made all these recipes. I tested all of them. I have my little home shots of them that, I sent. I could no more do this for a book than stand on my head. I am the world, aside from the fact that I don't have the kind of skill that she has at making things perfect. They shot about 11 shots a day. They averaged 11 shots a day. I could never figure out how to get 3 things out of the oven on time to be shot, let alone 11. It's such an interesting process because you need to be a talented baker, but you need like a spreadsheet for a brain to be able to time everything. For this, it was shot, all the photographs were shot last October. Yeah. And so it was height of COVID. There were Sam had an assistant, but the photographer didn't. So it was a very lean team in a studio, and we were connected by Zoom.
Oh, very interesting. And I just put the link again in the chat for folks if they want to sign up for your newsletter, just
Thank
in case they missed it earlier.
Joanne, you make you have a whole, like, you must make your own food for your books, yes?
Yes. We just, as for Pastry Love, we made them in the commissary and then brought them to a studio. And then, like you, there's a whole team of people that put it together. I hover around and just make sure that it's exactly as it should be, but I don't have the skill to figure out how it's going to look in a book.
It's
Tricky.
It's a different set of skills, and I'm grateful that somebody has them because it's not me.
Excellent. We have a couple of questions on this topic, but I'll ask this one because it has a lot of fun detail in the question. So I just had the great fun of making Dorie's strawberry baby cakes for our 2-year-old granddaughter's birthday in Prospect Park. I think Charlotte ate 7 of them herself. A delightful, delicious success. I also brought a loaf of Joanne's outstanding, reliable, delectable Flowers famous banana spread. Always a hit. This time I made the banana bread with King Arthur's gluten-free flour mix for one of the party guests who was trialing gluten-free diet. Can either or both of you speak about using gluten-free flour and how you think about success with this change of ingredients? Do some recipes not work well with GF flour? Are there ingredients in gluten flour mix recipes you feel are especially important or especially unpleasant?
Joanne, I'm going to let you take this. It's funny, I just got an email, maybe from the same person this morning, about gluten-free flour and wanting to know if she needed did she need to try and figure out recipe by recipe what would make a good gluten-free substitute, or could she just buy a flour that's a cup for cup equivalent?
Exactly.
And I don't know. Joanne?
I don't know either. I mean, we at the bakery, we use Cup for Cup, which is a gluten-free flour substitute that is, as its name says, allows you to just replace it cup for cup for all-purpose flour. But before that flour came out, we did play around with a lot of gluten-free baking by using almond flour, which is not the same and doesn't work like a regular grain flour, but you can create some great pastries using almond flour. So I think depending on the type, I don't know the King Arthur gluten-free flour. I don't know how it works, but I do know that cup for cup can be used in almost every recipe that we use regular flour. It has a little bit of a silty aftertaste, but I think if you're gluten-free, you're probably somewhat familiar with that trade-off. And you get a great gluten-free product.
So I don't, all of my recipes are tested, but they're not all tested with a gluten-free flour.
Okay.
But I have made several recipes using a cup for cup equivalent and been successful, but it's not, I just don't know enough about it. And often, so I get very excited when I get a recipe that I like, right? And sometimes Michael will be, well, you can't see this, but the living room's over there. And so he'll be sitting there reading and he'll hear me say, yes, and I'll get all excited. And I gave out a little squeal of yes when I realized that the cover cake, which is a recreation of a cake that I had in Lisbon, is gluten-free.
Ah, that's great.
So sometimes it's just that something is naturally
Right.
gluten-free. But yeah, I think the cup for cup would be.
You mentioned Lisbon. We have another question about travel, which says, do you always have a plan or do you ever wander? And have you ever found anything serendipitously that you didn't know about when you were traveling?
So I wander a lot. That's kind of my favorite way to do anything. And the cake on the cover was Serendipity. We were leaving Lisbon. We saw this cafe. We stopped in. We had, just a short time before we had to hop in a taxi and get to the airport. And we had this cake. I had no idea. I mean, it turns out the cafe we had it at Landau is famous, but wasn't famous to me. It was just a find. And I love that. I love when you just turn a corner and there's something that makes you open your eyes wide and start thinking about an idea.
That's wonderful.
The last time I ran into someone was you.
Exactly. I wanted to mention that Christopher's reminding me that we were wandering in Paris. I don't remember when, it was 5 years ago, maybe.
No,
And
what's shorter than that?
was it? So 3 years? I feel like the pandemic has
I
added.
know. I know.
So we were walking down a street, and I look into a cafe, and there's Dorie and Michael sitting down having lunch. And so we joined you for after lunch glasses of rosé, and then that proceeded to lead to going to your apartment, and you had a bunch of pastries, and we had a pastry tasting, and
we had dinner with friends. Yeah.
yeah,
So
it was amazing.
Wandering. It's a good thing.
Great thing.
Well, that sounds like it could be the plot of a movie. And we have a question from someone asking each of you, do you have a favorite cooking or baking movie?
I will have to say I like Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, which is at this point many, many years old, but I love, there's just a scene in there of the father who's cooking for his kids, and it's how he expresses love. And I feel like, Dorie, you put so much of your love in your recipes, and I know with little Gemma that so much of your baking now is wanting to give her some happiness, and I love that movie.
That movie is wonderful. I also love Tampopo. Do you know it?
Yes.
Yeah, I love it for the way, the discipline of learning to do something and practicing and practicing and practicing until you get it right. That's a great question.
A little something different. Now we have a couple more sort of brass tacks questions here. So the first one is, how do you choose a good olive oil for baking?
Okay, so I use a mild flavored olive oil most of the time because I want the kind of the velvetyness of the oil, but I often don't want the flavor. Depends. Joanne?
Same. I feel like it's like with olive oil, it's like honey. It's like you want the flavor. So with honey, you want the flavor of honey, but you don't necessarily want, if you pick a particular type of honey, it's going to have that reflect that taste. And it's not a bad thing, but sometimes you want something more neutral. So I feel like with an olive oil, it's just, you want that richness, but you don't necessarily want to be reminded that it's olive oil.
Yeah, I mean, you might, in baking, I think sometimes you might want the greenness of olive oil, but you might not want the pepperiness of some kind. So again, this is where the fun, this is a little fun thing, because just because I don't want the real taste of olive oil doesn't mean that somebody else won't. So choose an oil that you love. It's the same as, I think, choosing a chocolate
Right?
that you love, right?
Exactly.
All right, we have so many great questions, but I think we probably just have time for one more. And this one, it says, do you have any favorite baking podcasts or one of your own? And I would include Instagram as well in this question. Hint, hint for Joanne, but if you guys want to answer.
Take it, Joanne. These are the kinds of questions that, like, I can't think of a thing. I say goodnight and I think, oh, why didn't I?
Exactly.
So,
well, I don't listen to baking podcasts, but I do follow so many people on Instagram, and I wish I could like magically come up with them in my head right now. You mentioned Ottolenghi before. Ottolenghi has a pastry chef. I think it's Helen Go, but then he also has a pastry chef who works in one of the bakeries, Jens Ferdinand, I think his name is.
oh,
and he's great, and he posts a lot of pictures from the bakery, and he's very creative, and he's a lot of fun to follow. There's Brett, I'll have to look, but there's just so many great ones in Australia for some reason.
Australia has great pastry.
Right?
Great pastry chef. So the pastry chef, the Ritz, the famous hotel in Paris, opened a pastry shop called Comptoir. And when was it? I guess I was in Paris at last over the summer, and I had a cookie. I'm actually writing about this for my Times column. I had a cookie from the Ritz that I fell madly in love with. And I went to find the pastry chef on Instagram, and he had actually done a video of how to make it. He was making it for his children. So it's Francois Perret, Perret. You think of the Ritz as being the Ritz, but he's a very approachable pastry chef. And it's fun to watch Cédric Grolet.
I was going to say him as well.
Yeah, it's
beautiful stuff.
It's like magic. Right.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Well, the one that Joanne did not mention is also Flour Love. Flour has amazing, not a podcast, but Instagram that you can watch and bake along and everything. So we have to mention that.
Thank you.
Also, the Cherry Bomb Radio, which you can hear as a podcast. I think that Carrie Diamond does a great job.
She's fabulous.
Right, of interviewing chefs and pastry chefs, and really making people feel really comfortable, as you did, Joanne, and able to talk, easily about the work that they do. So.
Well, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you both for spending the night with us. And thank you to everyone out there in the internet for also spending your evening with us. You can learn more about and purchase the book on harvard.com or via the link in the chat. And so on behalf of Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I hope everyone has a great night or afternoon if you're in a different time zone, that you keep reading, and that everyone just please be well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you, Dorie. Don't forget your lasagna.
I know. I can smell it.
All right. Good night, all.
Yes, it's, I think, I'm guessing 5 minutes, but after I say good night, I'm actually going to check. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Harvard Bookstore, for inviting me again, Joanne. And this is for Christopher.
Mwah, mwah.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.